It's really embarrassing to say this as a teacher, but the problem with studying English in schools is that they've taught us the wrong way to study. To really master a language, this is what you need to do. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Eric Chong, and I'm a British English teacher. Now, you might think, Chong? That doesn't sound very British. Well, that's because my parents immigrated to the UK. But I was born and raised here in England, the beautiful birthplace of scones, Wimbledon, and football. Although, to be honest, I'm not really a fan of football, but anyway, enough about me. Let's cut to the chase. The way we study English in school is wrong. Now, don't misunderstand me. We learn a lot of useful English in schools, but there's also a very unhealthy, unrealistic way of studying that many of you have probably experienced. And that is cramming. Cramming means to study intensely for a short amount of time. And I think we've all done this, just before a very important test. We study all night, just remembering those vocabulary words and doing lots of test questions about grammar. But in real life, we're not studying to pass tests. We're studying to read books, understand dramas, and speak to real people. There is such a large gap between what we need to pass a test versus what we need to survive in the real world. In exams such as the Eiken Ikkyu or first grade, they will often test you on things like biology, politics, and maybe even recent news. But of course, not everyone's excited or interested in topics like biology or politics. And another problem is that many children, especially in Asia, are being forced to study all of these things in such a short amount of time. As natives, we naturally acquire and get language over many years. It's known that our vocabulary only reaches an adult level after maybe 18 or 19 years, and even then, it's still developing even after we've become an adult. And one interesting thing is that even students who get the best scores and even get perfect scores on some of these difficult tests, you find that they can't have a normal conversation. They don't know what to talk about, they can't make small talk, and all of these basic skills. Why is that? Well, the answer is, as I said before, you're studying to pass a test, not to talk to a real person. So here are some tips to help you master the language and, most importantly, be independent. That is, you can improve by yourself without the help of a teacher. As long as you spend the time, the effort, and understand yourself, then you'll be able to improve anywhere and any time. And that last point is our first piece of advice: understanding yourself. If you want to improve, the two main things that you need to know are your common mistakes and habits. For example, when you don't know a word, you often freeze and don't say anything. And the second thing is your level. Are you a beginner who needs to work on just grammar? Or maybe you're an intermediate level student and everyday conversations are a bit too easy for you. Understanding your own level is super important, because if you don't know your own level, you can't find materials and content to match your level. And everybody knows the feeling of buying a really cool looking book, but not being able to read it because it's too high level. The easiest way to find your own level is to ask a teacher. They can evaluate your skills and give you some advice on specific points, specific things that you need to fix or improve. And the nice thing about this is you don't need that much money. Maybe just 1 or 2 lessons to help you get some ideas on your weak points. And then you can just move over to self-study. Now, the next thing to remember is that we don't need to study everything. At the beginning, the foundation and all of the basic grammar points, yes, you should study all of this stuff. But as you get to the higher levels, intermediate, advanced, ACHEN grade 2 and 1, then things start to change. The language and the grammar points that you see in these books and videos, they're actually not used in everyday life so much. This kind of language you're gonna see in the news, scientific articles, and, well, exams. And this is exactly how I studied Japanese. When I was a beginner, I studied all of the basic grammar and vocab, and then as I got to the intermediate level, I didn't use textbooks. I just spoke to a lot of people, and then when I didn't know something, like a grammar point or vocabulary, I just looked it up. That way, I didn't have to worry about finishing all of the chapters in the book, and I could just focus on, well, having fun. And I think everyone can understand the feeling of working really hard to study a phrase or maybe a grammar point, and then later realizing that natives don't actually use it that often. And then you look back and think, why the heck did I spend all the time and effort to study this thing? Like, oh, what a waste of time. But be very careful when you start thinking about efficiency and what you need to study. Most of us have very busy lives, and it can be really difficult to find that time to study English. And that's why all of these YouTube videos with titles such as How to Learn English in 1 Month, they're very attractive, but they're not realistic. And instead of efficiency, it's more important sometimes to think about fun. Because fun and interest are strongly linked to motivation. I want to quickly share a short personal story. I am incredibly stingy. That is, I don't like to spend too much money. Of course, special occasions and maybe treating a friend is totally fine, but generally, I don't like to spend too much. For example, I'm shopping in the supermarket and I see 2 large red peppers. One is perfectly shiny, it's a bright red, very tasty looking, but the other has a big black spot. But it's discounted by 50%, and I think, ooh, 50%, that's quite a lot. So I buy the discounted one and I just cut off the black spot. If I cut off the weird part, it's gonna be fine, right? That is how stingy I am. Now, I self-studied Japanese for 7 years, but for the first 4 years, I refused to buy lessons, and I didn't go to a language school. The only things that I did buy were my first textbooks. And in the end, I don't regret not paying for lessons, and actually I was able to reach the intermediate level just through self-study. But I felt like something was missing. After becoming an English teacher, I had a bit more money to spare, so I decided to just buy a few lessons. And through those lessons, I met other teachers, made some friends, and I eventually found my regular Japanese teacher. And I've been taking lessons with her for 3 years now. So why? What changed? Why did I stop becoming stingy and decide to buy language lessons? Well, very simple reason. It's just because they were incredibly fun. Finding the fastest and most efficient way to learn a language is okay, but if you don't have the motivation to study in the first place, well, you're not going to get anywhere. I want you to imagine you are planning to open your own factory, selling some sort of product, maybe a toy or something like that. And even before you have the factory, you're thinking, okay, how can we make things faster? Yeah, how can we make it more efficient? How can we increase profits? And then your friend says to you, well, we don't have the factory yet, so shouldn't we think about this after we have the factory? Efficiency and getting big results in a short amount of time often involve intense work, like cramming before an important test. But then you get bored and stressed and you burn out. Also, there are ways to make studying fun but efficient at the same time. I won't talk about efficiency today, but one easy way to make study time and learning more fun and interesting, and as a result increase your motivation, is to choose interesting topics. It really surprises me when I ask some of my students, hey, what do you like to talk about in your own language? What are your interests? A surprising amount of them say, I don't know. A common test question is, what are your hobbies? And when we think hobbies, it's usually something that we do, right? Like playing the piano or maybe playing tennis. But it doesn't always have to be something you do. It can just be something that you're interested in. For example, I'm not a very good cook, but I actually really enjoy watching cooking shows. Now you might think, oh, but cooking vocabulary and studying cooking, it's not so useful in real life, right? Because I don't cook. But if you watch a lot of cooking shows and read a lot of cooking books and you're enjoying it, naturally, you're not just going to be improving vocabulary, but also things like grammar. When it comes to English in cooking, you'll often use the command form, which is, well, giving orders to somebody. You know, when you're explaining a recipe or doing a cooking class, you often have to say things like, first, boil the water, and then after that, put the dried pasta into the pot. Oh, but be careful, you mustn't put it in too early. Like this, you're giving instructions but also warning people about what they must, should, or shouldn't do. So as you can see, you have the chance to use a wide range of grammar, which we can use in any topic, not just cooking. And the second way to make studying English a lot more fun, if you're a sociable person like me and you enjoy speaking or getting to know new people, finding the right partner is essential. It's a non-negotiable. In other words, you have to do this. If you can find another language partner who is just as passionate about learning and improving as you, your language abilities are going to skyrocket. Now, finding the right partner is not just finding somebody who is good at languages or is good at teaching language, but actually one thing that many people don't realize is chemistry. Chemistry is the natural connection. It's how well you get along together and how many things you have in common. It's always easier to connect with somebody who has the same interests as you, right? So, finding somebody who can talk to you in depth about anime and your favorite series, somebody who can understand your small jokes, that will boost your motivation because you'll enjoy the conversation a lot more, and as a result, you'll want to speak for much longer. More output, more improvement. Of course, it can take a really long time to find somebody who you have great chemistry with, a good relationship, but that's okay. You can go to meetup events, try different language partners and teachers, and eventually, I'm sure you will find one. But you need to keep searching. Okay, we're almost there. Don't worry, there's only one more thing that I want to share with you. You know, sometimes when you just come back from work or maybe school and you're just exhausted. you don't have the energy to study even just 5 minutes. That is normal. Everybody has experienced this before. So one final important thing to think about is, how can we make studying easier? Because actually, once you sit down and you start studying and you're in the zone, meaning you're very focused, it's easy to study for 20, 30, 40 minutes. But starting is the most difficult part, isn't it? So to solve this problem, we need to decrease the barrier for entry. In other words, we need to make it easier to start studying. Now, there are different ways of doing this, but for example, if you study using a textbook or any graded reader or storybook, just put the book on the living room table or any place that you often go to in your home. And then every time you feel like, I don't feel like studying today, but you see the book is right next to you, it's just on the other side of the living room, you think, well, it's just over there, so just, whatever, 5 minutes, I'm waiting for dinner anyway. You open the book, and suddenly you realize it is 30 minutes later. Similarly, if you're using YouTube videos to study, bookmark the channel or the playlists that you use to study English. And make sure the bookmark is on your front page, at the top of your browser window, so that you don't have to click through any other folders or extra menus. Make it as easy as possible to access these learning materials. That way, you really have no excuse to be lazy. I'll be honest, I've done a lot of these things myself. I put the book right next to my work table, and even then, I'm still too lazy to study sometimes. So don't beat yourself up. This is not a perfect solution, but it's better than nothing, right? It's better than searching through your bookshelf for 5 minutes just to find that book you were reading last time. But one of the best ways to make yourself study is to schedule a regular conversation class, maybe online or in person, but not everybody has the money or time to go to a language school. So nowadays, online private English lessons are the most convenient. And also, because you've already paid for the class and you don't want to just make the teacher wait, you kind of have to kick yourself up the butt and just force yourself to take the class and study. Even if you feel like, oh, today I'm tired, I went outside and it was cold, so I don't want to study. Shut up! You can't just make those excuses, you just have to attend the lesson, and sometimes that is a good thing. Okay, I think you've listened to my boring voice for long enough, so I'm going to let you go now. Those are my pieces of advice for how to study English in real life. Not for exams, not in school, but to be independent and find your own things to study. Because in the long run, you know yourself best. You can ask teachers for advice, but you can't ask them for motivation. And that's what stops most people from mastering a language. Not time, not effort, not efficiency. It is just a matter of motivation. Have a wonderful week. Take care and bye for now.